What is up, everybody? Welcome to the MMA Engine and welcome to Propability. We're going to take a data-driven look into some of these props for UFC Vegas 53. I cannot wait to break it down. As always, here with the man behind the stats, we have Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, you looking forward to breaking this down?
Very much so, man. This is like we always say, dude. The cards, some are great, but with name value, some aren't. But really, at the end of the day, as gamblers, we love the cards where we're making money. And we got a chance to make some money on this card. We got 12 fights. They're all ready to be analyzed. And we're going to find some that we like more than others. But let's find some spots that we can gamble on and make these fights a whole hell of a lot more interesting. Because that's the thing about gambling. You can make something very uninteresting interesting if you put enough money on it, baby. So let's make some money this week and let's watch some fights.
Yes, sir. That is always the goal. Make it some money. Let us shout out the chat before we get started. If you guys can please leave a like, subscribe here to the MMA Engine. Tons of content throughout the week. I will not be here next week. Filling in for me is going to be Lou Betchu with the hosting role. So it should be a fun show next week there. But yeah, make sure you guys are subscribed. Tons of content coming your way. And we got Mushroom, first one in the chat. What is up, Mushroom? How you do? We got Daz Files in the room. We got the man Lou Betcha hanging out as well. Jester, do appreciate the compliment a ton. Jester hanging out. We got Gerald, Papa Chuck. We got Brandon hanging out as always. We got Smooth Cat is able to tune in live there. Philip as well. We got Zach, Victor, and Jeffrey. Thank you all for hanging out. We're going to get started, and we're going to start with a very first fight of the night. And we have Taira going against Carlos Candelario. So reminder, we're going to get our fight goes and fight doesn't go from BetOnline. But BetOnline does not have some lines out for some of these fights for some reason. But we have the over-under. Looks like it's set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is minus 117. The under 2.5 rounds is minus 113. The fight goes to decision plus money plus 110. And the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 140. Weezy, anything sticking out here?
Yeah, so, okay, we got Candelario and Taira here. Candelario, 2 Contender Series fights. This is Taira's UFC debut. So we're going to have to say over on the left side of the spreadsheet and go with the overall finish rates and the overall decision rates here. We're going to notice that for Candelario and Taira, we've got 19 total fights between these two guys, and 13 of them have finished inside the distance. That's 68.4%. The divisional finish rate at the UFC level at 125 pounds since 2013 for 3-round fights is 39.82%. So versus the divisional finish rate, 28.6% better, versus the implied probability of the fight doesn't go to decision line, 10% better. And then we go over here, but we've only got 2 fights. So we're seeing big red here because both of Candelario's fights that were on the Contender Series went the full 15 minutes. So it's showing here that we shouldn't be betting on the fight doesn't go to decision. And we're going to see big green here because we've only got these 2 fights. And over here on the left side, we've got 6 of 19 combined fights for these 2 gentlemen have went to decision. That's 31%, 16% worse than the implied probability of the line. Now, what I think is interesting here is when we go over here to the betting lines, I've added this new line down here, which is we're going to compare the implied probability of all of these lines to the corresponding rates of how these things finish according to each division. So, for instance, this square right here, this is the implied probability of the fight not going to decision, which is 39.82%, minus the implied probability of the line, which is 58.33%. So what this is telling us, Brady, is that for the fight doesn't go to decision line, we are overpaying by 18.5% based on the UFC finish rate in the flyweight division, which is telling us that this plus 110 for the fight goes to decision, that we're getting at a 47.62% implied probability. What the reality is that 60.18% of flyweight fights in the UFC go the distance here. So we're getting a fight goes to decision that for flyweights is underpriced by about 12.56%. So even though the spreadsheet is telling us that these guys have got a lot of fights that have finished inside the distance, specifically Brady, 13 of 19 of them, and that's 68.4%. It's 10% better than the implied probability of 58.33%. So it's telling us that the fight doesn't go to decision is a good bet. But the problem is that 17 out of those 19 fights were regional scene fights against much lower levels of competition here. So when we consider the finish rate for the flyweight division, the over 2.5 showing 9.88% value, the over 1.5 at minus 195 showing 8.11% value, and the fight goes to decision showing us 12.56% value. I'm loving the fight goes to decision for this particular fight at plus money. Candelario's never been finished. Taira's never lost. And I think that this has got a good chance of seeing the full 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And like Candelario has fought some very good grapplers before. He fought that really good grappler in his first fight on the Contender Series. So I guess I'd be worried about the Taira sub if anything. But yeah, mine or plus 110. I can't believe that fight goes to decision. Bet online, and looks like that bet online plus 110 is the best line you can get out there. So yeah, I do like that, Weezy.
Yeah, and really this is just a way to compare what the line is comparison to the finish rate for the division. So basically what it's telling us is that if we're betting a fight goes to decision for a flyweight fight, 3 rounds, that we're probably going to pay around minus 150 because that's about 60%. So instead of paying minus 150, we're paying plus 110. So we're seeing quite a bit of value here in comparison to how flyweight fights finish on the aggregate. So we got a couple guys that are making their official UFC debut here. So we know we could see a finish. We could see an adrenaline dump. But, both these guys are pretty good. Only one combined loss between the two of them. And we've seen Candelario in particular put in some bad spots. And he seemed to survive them really well on the ground. So fight goes to decision at plus 110 is a bet that I will be making this week.
Yep, sounds good to me. Let us move on to the next fight. Very curious to hear your thoughts on this one. We have Gina Mazany going against Shanna Young. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds, minus 165. The under 2.5 rounds, plus 135. The fight goes to decision, sitting at minus 145. And the fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at plus 115.
Okay, so the first number that we're going to take a look at, Brady, is the finish rate for 125-pound women historically since 2016. There have been 146 fights that were 3 rounds for women's flyweights. 60 of them have finished inside the distance. That's a 41.1% implied probability of a finish over the aggregate, right? So overall finish rates, 15 of these ladies' 23 combined fights have finished inside the distance. That's 65%. That's 19.8% better than the implied probability of the fight doesn't go to decision line. Now, with Young and Mazany, we've got a decent sample size of 10 total fights between the two of them. Brady, 7 of their 10 total UFC fights have finished inside the distance. Now, keep in mind that on average, about 4.1 out of 10 fights finish inside the distance in the women's flyweight division. So not only are these ladies finishing at a high rate, they're also getting finished at a very high rate, as 6 of their 8 combined losses have come inside the distance, and 1 of their 2 combined wins have come inside the distance. So we see a lot of green here up in the fight doesn't go to decision area. It's really telling us that the implied probability of a plus 120 line is 45%. So this looks like, according to the divisional finish rates, we see a lot of yellow and light orange here, which tells us that the lines are priced pretty fairly in terms of divisional finish rates. But when we compare it to the individual finish rates for and against for Young and Mazany combined, we're seeing a lot of value on the fight doesn't go to decision. The fight doesn't go overpriced by 4.36% in comparison to my model. The under 2.5 overpriced by 3.83. The under 1.5 overpriced by 8.02%. So I'm thinking that the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 120 is the look here, because 7 of 10 combined UFC fights finishing inside the distance between Young and Mazany, and 15 of 23 professional fights finishing inside the distance. These are both much better than the implied probability of the line at 45%, and better than the 41% aggregate finish line for the women's flyweight division. This is another one that I'm taking a long look at. The fight doesn't go to decision because it appears that everybody's betting the fight goes and the value is gone on that line, like long gone. Look at this. 30% were overpaying for the implied probability of the line because only 3 of their 10 fights have went to decision.
There you go. I like it. That is a lot of green on that fight doesn't go. I like to see that. But yeah, plus 115. You got Bet Online there. For some reason, Caesars has plus 145. Fight doesn't go to decision. I think that's insane. But yeah, I like it. I like it. I wish I had a Caesars account. My goodness. Looks like DraftKings plus 110, then 5 dimes plus 120. So yeah, that plus 115 on Bet Online is something I consider. We talked about on Stat Diggers as well about the unders and the fight doesn't go being a very sneaky look potentially.
Yeah, because with women's fights, the tendency is that the fight goes is going to be overpriced, and with men's fights, the fight doesn't go is going to be overpriced. But in this case, we have to play into that variance. We have to play into the pricing and find the spots where we're getting value over the benchmark and over the implied probability of the line. And in this case, in the Mazany Young case, we're getting value in both areas when it comes to the fight doesn't go. So that is one that I'm definitely writing down, and I'm going to be making a bet on that one as well.
Sounds good. There we go. Let's keep moving on. We have Natan Levy going against Mike Breeden. They have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is minus 180. The under 2.5 rounds is plus 150. The fight goes to decision, minus 150, and the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 120. Yeah, this should be a good one, Weezy.
Yeah, man. So we've seen 2 of 5 combined losses in the pros here for Levy and Breeden have been inside the distance, and 11 of 16 wins combined have been inside the distance. We add up those 2 numbers. We got 13 of 21. That's like 62%. That's a little bit better than the divisional finish rate at 11.5% and 14.3% better than the implied probability of the line. We don't have much in terms of a sample size for UFC fights. We've only got 4 of them, and I believe 2 of them are contender series fights. So down here at the fight doesn't, or the fight goes to decision, we're probably overpaying here by about 8.3%, and we're underpaying for the fight doesn't go by about 2.4%. So it's looking like the line is fairly priced for this particular fight, according to the data, according to the implied probability of the line, according to the divisional finish marks. And, we have to kind of sit over here on the left side of the spreadsheet just because we have more data here. We've got 21 total fights instead of 4. And, it is showing us a little bit of an advantage here in terms of the fight doesn't go. When we look over here at the lines, the fight doesn't go underpriced by 2.75%. The under 2.5 underpriced by 6.24%. So the prop template, Brady, likes the under. It likes the fight doesn't go. And it concurs when we look at these betting lines. It looks like the betting lines are underpriced in comparison to the finish rates for the division. So this is not something that's screaming at me to bet it, but it is leaning that the favor goes to the fight doesn't go or the under 2.5 or the under 1.5. I would say that my model is saying that the under 2.5 is the best bet of the 3 unders that are available.
Sounds good. Yeah, the under 2.5 on BetOnline plus 150, 5 dimes plus 158, and look like FanDuel plus 148. Yeah, nothing really screaming out to me as well. I actually don't have a bet on this fight as a whole. Kind of a tricky fight to break down. So yeah, I think this is one I'm going to be staying away from. But let us keep moving on. I'm very curious to talk about the next one. Like very curious. We have a Gabe Green going against Yohan Lainesse. Probably one of my favorite fights on the prelims here. We have the over-under is set at, looks like 1.5 rounds. Yeah, 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 is minus 125. The under 1.5 is minus 105. BetOnline still on a Thursday does not have props out for this fight, which is just insane. Looks like the fight goes to decision on 5 dimes plus 175. The fight doesn't go to decision on 5 dimes is minus 225. And yeah, the bookies are thinking it. I'm thinking it as well. We see some violence here.
Yeah. So let's first kind of we don't have really a sample size for Green and Lainesse, 3 total fights. So let's stay on the left side of the sheet. Look at the overall numbers, right? Gabe Green, 9 of 10 wins inside the distance. Lainesse, 6 of 8. 15 of 18 wins inside the distance combined for these guys, 83.3%. 2 of their 3 combined career losses inside the distance, 66.67%. 17 of 21 combined fights between Lainesse and Green finishing inside the distance, 81%, Brady. That's 32.5% better than the 48.43% finish rate for 170 pounders. And still, even where the line is now, and the line is blown out, still we're getting an 11.7% edge with 81% of these guys' fights finishing inside the distance, but the implied probability for the fight doesn't go is 69.23. So when we take 81 minus 0.6923, we get 20% that we're overpaying for this line at its current price of minus 225. But what the prop template is telling us is that because Green and Lainesse's fights are finishing inside the distance 17 of 21 times, that's 81%. And since we're only paying 69.23% on the line, that we're actually getting 12% value. But we got to be careful because still, we're paying minus 225. So it is something that is, we got to put up 2.25 units to win one. And whenever we're putting up more than 2 units to win one, we got to be very certain about what we're doing. But the template is telling us, look, they're overpricing this line by 20.8%. They're underpricing the fight goes to decision line by 15.21%. But I still think you'd be almost nuts to bet that because these guys are very front loaded. And we've got a stylistic matchup here where you've got Lainesse, who's very dangerous early, but brings poor conditioning, and Green, who has been stopped twice in the first round. But when he gets out of that first round, you see that he's very durable. He's got great conditioning. He puts a pace on his opponents and he walks forward. So I could see Lainesse being broken late and I could see Green being broken early. So even at minus 225, which is a pretty blown out line for a fight doesn't go to decision in the 170-pound division, it would appear that even with these two guys here, that it's a little bit underpriced at that price.
Yeah, I mean,
Brady, do they have over and under 2.5s on any books right now? Because I'd like to just see where those lines are at so we can see if there's better value on an under 2.5 here. Maybe we can get a better price.
Yeah, the under 2.5 rounds, and this looks to be on Betway, is minus 175.
Minus 175, huh? Yeah, and still, even at minus 175, that line is overpriced by 19.61%. So, they don't want us betting this over, but there's a very good reason why they don't want us betting, the under.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very good reason, and that's because, there's an 81% chance that these guys' fights are finishing inside the distance over a 21 combined fight sample size. As the bookies, they don't want to get in the way of that, so they're going to price this thing up, and that's exactly what they've done.
That is exactly what they did. And I had this one circled, researching this on Sunday. I said, hey, I'm going to look forward to betting the fight doesn't go to decision. And the only price I can bet it at right now would be on DraftKings, and that is minus 250. BetOnline does not have it out. FanDuel doesn't have it out. And I only have access to DraftKings, so I would have to bet the minus 250. And I don't know, maybe a parlay piece, if anything, but probably not going to get there.
See, that's the thing that's what's so great about this prop template is that, as gamblers, you can look at it a couple of different ways. You can say, look, is this bet going to cash or not? And I get it, because some people say there's value, right? We got to look for value. And then there's the other people who say, fuck value. Did your bet cash or did it not cash? Oh, it didn't cash? Congratulations on your value, But the thing is that over a long enough timeline, if we just keep betting minus 250 for every fight that we think doesn't go to decision without actually asking ourselves, are we overpaying this or are we underpaying for this? Those lines where we're underpaying for it at minus 250, we can slam the shit out of it. But we just know that in this case at minus 225, minus 250 on DraftKings, that we got to kind of tread lightly. Maybe we would put it in a parlay. Maybe we don't want to have 2.5 units on it. We just have to be cognizant that, yeah, it probably will cash, but we're paying up for the privilege to have this ticket.
Yeah, like when you're paying like minus 250 for a fight doesn't go, you have to be like sure about it. Like last week, we bet that the Jordan Wright fight doesn't go decision. It was around minus 200. Like that's, definitely acceptable. We got the Else fight doesn't go decision around minus 175. Like that's acceptable, but we're not going out there and laying like minus 400 on spots we think is going to finish just because we think it's going to finish. We got to take into consideration the line because some of these fights will go to decision. And if you're laying like minus 400, it can definitely get you in trouble in the long run for sure.
Absolutely. And that's why the price matters for sure. I mean, like Pedro Villanueva, that fight doesn't go to decision was what? Minus 500, minus 600 in some spots.
Yeah.
Now, did we think it was going to finish inside the distance? Absolutely. But did we have a bet on it? No. You don't have to bet it at that price. Let's find these ones that have some value. Bet those.
Yeah, like remember it was the Silva Pereira fight. It was like fight doesn't go decision like minus 650, minus 700. Yeah, we thought it was going to finish, but are we laying minus 700? No, we're not. And thank goodness we didn't because we would have looked like complete idiots, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, and it's not like the guys who bet the fight doesn't go to decision were idiots thinking that was going to finish inside the distance. I mean, it could have finished like 6 different times, but you were just paying too much. So you shouldn't have been invested in it in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Let us keep moving on, though, to the next fight. We have Daniel Da Silva going against Francisco Figueiredo, and we have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. Another fight that BetOnline does not have it, so we'll take a look at 5 Dimes. 5 Dimes has the over 2.5, minus 117, under 2.5 rounds, minus 103. The fight goes to decision, plus 100, and the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 130.
Look at all that green, Brady.
It's a lot of green.
Look at all that green right there for the fight doesn't go to decision. So we don't have much of a sample size. Lacerda, Figueiredo, 3 total UFC fights. So let's stay on the left side of the sheet here. Daniel Lacerda is the definition of a kill or be killed fighter. We've targeted with big bets some kill or be killed fighters the last few weeks, Brady. Cameron Else, Jordan Wright, Nikita Krylov against Paul Craig. We nailed that one, right? There was one last week that didn't work. The Prachnio-Linz fight didn't work. But, we love the killer be killed fighters. That's the archetype that usually is going to cash for us. Lacerda has 13 professional fights, you guys. All 13 of them have finished inside the distance. All 13 of them have finished under 7.5 minutes. Killer be killed. Francisco Figueiredo, 12 of his 18 professional fights have finished inside the distance. That's 66%. Put together, these two fighters, 25 of 31 finishing inside the distance. That's over 80%. It's hard to price a line up to 80%. You got to get up to minus 400 to do that. So we see that versus the divisional finish rate, 40.8% better. And versus the implied probability of the fight doesn't go to decision line at minus 130, Brady, we're getting a 29.4% advantage over the books. Now let's see. And still here, we see the fight doesn't go to decision line. And you said that's minus what?
Minus 130.
Okay, I got it at minus 105. So it's moved from earlier in the week.
Minus 105. Yeah, minus 105, minus 102 on. Wait, no, that's the under. Yeah, minus 105 is on Caesars.
On Caesars, okay. Minus 130 though is on a book that we all have, right? Like
that's 5 Dimes, and then DraftKings says minus 135.
What's the fight goes?
The fight goes on DraftKings is plus 100.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we're overpaying by 16.7% compared to this 39.82% finish rate. But we are looking here in Figueiredo and Lacerda. We've got, 80% of their fights finishing inside the distance. So if you put that 80% up against the 56.5% implied probability of that minus 130, I think that's a great spot. And I just don't ever shy away from a fight doesn't go to decision line that's got a killer be killed fighter in there, especially a young one. when I'm not paying minus 250, minus 300 at minus 130, dude, this is an auto bet. This 24% implied probability bump that we're getting at 80.6% is something we cannot walk away from. Fight doesn't go to decision for Lacerda. Figueiredo is a bet.
Yeah, what is it you typically say? De Silva fights double parked, right?
Yeah, like he fights like he's double parked. For those of you guys who don't live in the big city, every once in a while, parking's hard to find. So what you'll do is you're not going to find a parking spot, but you got to run in there and get a pack of smokes, or you got to pick something up real quick, and then you block somebody in, so they can't leave. You run into the store and you got to fucking get in and out of there, because if by the time that person comes back to their car and you're blocking them, you might get into a fight. So everything that you do when you're double parked, you do it like you're fucking panicking, and like you got to do it as fast as possible. And it's the best analogy for how this dude fights. From the very first second of the fight, he's trying to kill you. So you can't push that pace for 15 minutes. Human beings can't push that frantic pace for 15 minutes. It means it's going to finish inside the distance.
Yeah, and somebody made a really good comparison. I forget who it was. Would like to credit the guy, but they compared De Silva to like a Terrence McKinney. Like, just goes out there, balls to the wall, like a Terrence McKinney type. And I see it. He goes out there trying to kill his opponent as soon as possible. So yeah, I like that bet. And on DraftKings Sportsbook, I think like the fight won't start round 3 at plus 120 is very intriguing, considering De Silva's never seen a third round. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I mean, because like we say, it's the archetype of fighter that we're betting against. And I found some value last week realizing that Lemos and Andrade had never had a finish after the second round. So instead of betting the fight doesn't go to decision, I bet the under 2.5. It made a difference of paying up from minus 200 down to plus 130. That's like 20% implied probability discount. That's huge. Yeah. When we find, that's the value that I'm looking for these best win conditions.
Looks like Brandon said Brandon, perfect comparison. Terrence.
Yep. Nice work, Brandon.
All right, let us keep moving on. Oh boy, we have Alexandr Romanov, Chase Sherman, rebooked. Hopefully we get to see it, but we have the over-under. Looks like Bet Online as well doesn't have these props out. We'll go to 5 dimes. The over-under is set at 1.5. The over 1.5 plus 240. The under 1.5 minus 280. Bet Online actually does that of the under 1.5. It's minus 305.
I'm sorry, Brady. Repeat that again.
Okay, so the over 1.5 on 5 dimes is plus 240. The under 1.5 on 5 dimes is minus 280. The fight goes to decision on 5 dimes is plus 500, and the fight doesn't go to decision on 5 dimes is minus 800. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but on 5 dimes, the fight doesn't go, opened at minus 3,225. It might have been a mistake. I don't know, but and then instantly went to plus or minus 800. So I don't know if that was a mistake or what, but regardless, this line is the most juiced fight doesn't go to decision you'll probably ever see. Like, for example, on Betway, the fight doesn't go as minus 1408. You just don't ever see that. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy, and that's the thing, right? We have the finish rates right here on the template. 63.5% of heavyweight fights that are 3 rounds finish inside the distance since 2013. It's a huge sample size, over 270 fights. So when somebody's telling you, oh yeah, fight doesn't go to decision, minus 1,500, shit, dude, they're telling you that this thing's going to finish inside the distance 94% of the time. They only finish 64% of the time. You're overpaying by 30%. So like I say, go ahead and bet it if you feel like betting it, but you're going to get hammered if you make that bet 10 times and you're wrong once. You're wrong once. That's all you have to be in order to be a loser long term. So it's a bad spot to be. But yeah, at minus 800, the betting line thing here is telling us that we're overpaying by 25.42%. for the fight doesn't go. The under 2.5 sitting at minus 550, did you say?
Yeah, the under 2.5 is sitting at minus 525.
Minus 525, a veritable bargain. So 84% implied probability. So we're overpaying there by 25%. So yes, is this fight going to finish inside the distance? I mean, most likely, okay? 28 of these guys, 30 combined wins inside the distance. 5 of these guys, 9 combined losses inside the distance. 33 of 39. 85% of these guys' fights finishing inside the distance. And they've got the implied probability of that line so high that we're actually overpaying, despite the fact that these guys finish 85% of their 39 combined fights inside the distance. We're still overpaying for that line. So what is this telling us, Brady? It tells us that this fight is not going to go to decision, but it simultaneously tells us that it's unbettable. Why should we overpay for 25% to get a minus 800 line when we can underpay by 23% on the Lacerda Figueiredo fight and get plus money?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like these are the things. That's why you go through everything on the slate. You go through all 12 fights. And you might say, you know, before you look at the lines, oh, yeah, that's Sherman Romanov is finishing inside the distance. Well, congratulations. You know, it's like saying, yeah, this guy's about to roll a 6-sided die, and I predict that he's not going to roll a 7. Oh, well, good. You know, it's a great fucking prediction. It's going to come true. But is anybody going to take the other side of that bet? Nobody with an IQ above room temperature. So, you know, you're just preaching to the choir. Everybody knows that this fight's going to finish inside the distance, but there's no way to make money on it. So we just got to move on. And it's the same thing if you're trying to find ways to bet on Romanov to make money. You're going to overpay. You're going to overpay so much. You know, oh, you want Romanov by submission? Minus 150. Well, what, you know, I mean, like we already know that only 63% of fights even finish inside the distance, you know, so you're already paying that rate. And then you're saying that now we can't even get a knockout, and now we can't even get a decision. It has to be a submission. And then you overpaid for it like crazy. So unbettable fight, Brady.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbettable. Like on DraftKings, you got the fight doesn't go minus 900. Like it's not even parlayable. The fight won't start round 2 is minus 200. Fight won't start round 3 minus 500. Just there's nothing that interests me. And then on top of that, we have Romanov at minus 2,500. So yeah, Romanov should win. He should win in the first round, but you know, anything can happen. Like what if it gets to the second, to the third? You know, you don't want to lay minus 1,000 on a fight doesn't go to the decision line like that.
It's rough. It's rough. It's unbettable. I mean, and the prop template is telling us that you don't overpay by 25% for a line that you got to lay down $8 to win 1. Come on, man. Forget it. Move on.
Yes, sir. We got the next fight. This is going to be an interesting one. We have Krzysztof Jotko going against Gerald Meerschaert. And the reason why this is going to be interesting, we have a guy in Jotko who is not a finisher at all. And then we have Gerald Meerschaert, who all the guy does is finish. So I'm curious to see, you know, where the value lies on this one here. So we have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds on Bet Online is minus 125. The under 2.5 rounds is minus 105. And it looks like Bet Online does not have the fight goes or doesn't go. So we'll look at 5 dimes there. 5 dimes has the fight goes to decision plus 105, and the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 135. This one should be a good one, Weezy.
Do you have an over and under 1.5? Because I fucked up and I put the Sherman Romanov stuff in the over under 1.5. I just want to get those right.
The over 1.5 is minus 200 on 5 dimes, and the under 1.5 is plus 170.
170. Okay, cool. So we got one of these weird fights here. And usually when we've got a fight like this, the line is going to be priced perfectly. And I think in this case it is, right? Because we've got Jotko, who you know, he woke up this morning, he went to go have a banana. He finished half of it, and then he went to his wife. He's like, I can't finish this. You want to finish this banana for me? So he can't, look, he's not finishing anybody in the UFC level here. So 7 of 23 wins coming inside the distance for Jotko, 3 of 5 losses. So 10 of his 28 fights, very low rate, you know, for a middleweight in particular, for him to have only a 35% finish rate. And then you got Meerschaert, 43 of this guy's 48 fights have finished inside the distance. So 89%. So you see here the red on top, the green in the middle, and then like the light green on the bottom. And really what that's telling us is that we've got this clash of styles. This is the kind of fight where the prop template is telling us, yeah, the props are priced correctly in terms of the over-unders, and the fight goes and the fight doesn't go. The value is going to be on Jotko by decision and Meerschaert inside the distance. Because, you know, I mean, like, we can look at people's win conditions here, and it's a very important thing to look at. It tells you things about how people fight, especially when there's a big sample size, Brady. When you have 34 career wins and 32 of them are inside the distance, it tells me that you don't win minutes. You win moments. You finish fights, you know, but you might be losing the fight up to that point. And I mean, could there be a better example of that than Gerald Meerschaert? You know, a guy who's out there just getting punched in the face. He doesn't have particularly great striking or great striking defense. But my God, if you go to the ground with this guy, you are in serious trouble. And he can finish when he's tired. He can finish when you're wet. You know, I mean, you can finish when you're dry earlier in the fight, you know. But sometimes he's got this hypnotist quality to him, like, hey, Trevin Giles, come into my guard in the third round, even though you're winning this fight. And Giles, what does he do? He goes into the guard and fights over, you know. Dustin Stoltzfus, hey, Dustin, you're winning the first 2.5 rounds. How about you roll for a fucking leg lock? Well, how do you think that worked out, you know? So Meerschaert's a guy who loses the fight up until he wins it. His best win condition is winning inside the distance. He's done it 32 times out of 34 wins. So, and then Jotko, in 10 UFC fights, he's got 10 wins. Only one of them has been inside the distance. Gerald Meerschaert has 9 UFC wins. All 9 have been inside the distance. So you get these 10 out of 19 wins inside the distance, 52%. And then you see these yellow boxes here, which indicate that they're very fairly priced. This is so fairly priced, Brady. You never really see this. Look at this. 17 of 30 of these guys combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance. That's 56.7%. And the line and the implied probability of the line is 57.45%. So it's literally perfectly priced to the third decimal place. I mean, it's unbelievable. So we've got to search for Jotko by decision, and we got to search for Meerschaert by sub, because Jotko, you know, has been knocked out a couple of times, but, you know, Meerschaert not really a knockout artist. So this is one, and we can see even here all these lines within like 5%, and they're all overpriced, every single one of them. It's because the aggregate numbers fit perfectly in with where the lines are priced. So we're not getting any value either way. Stay away from the time props in this fight and bet either Jotko by decision or the finish only prop on Gerald Meerschaert.
Yep, and we'll talk about that. So Jotko is minus 174 on FanDuel, and I just don't get this. They have the decision for Jotko is plus 200. Like, this guy is, you know, nearly a minus 200 favorite. Why is his decision prop plus 200? I'm not sure. So if you like Jotko, yeah, plus 200 by decision, and I might even jump on that, because that is completely off in my opinion. And then on top of that, if you like Meerschaert inside the distance, which is plus 250 on DraftKings, but we will talk about this. So we have the finish only, and this shocks me. The finish only for Meerschaert currently on DraftKings Sportsbook is plus 110, which again does not make sense. So I think the finish only, which is the scorecards equals no action. And by the way, Weezy, what do you think Romanov finish only is?
Well, I mean, if he's minus 2,500, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he would have to be at least probably at least minus 2,500 for finish only, but maybe minus 3,000, maybe minus 3,500. Minus 5,000? Is it minus 5,000?
Minus 10,000.
Jesus Christ.
That's like, what? Come on.
Does that mean that you would have to win 1,000 consecutive bets to come out 1% ahead? Is that what? I think that, like, at minus 10,000, that's a 99% implied probability.
99 right on the dot.
So if you're right 100 out of 100 times, congratulations, you're up 1%.
That's crazy. But yeah, I know you're on that Jotko decision, right? And you're on that Meerschaert finish only as well, right?
I'm on both of them. You know, this is
like
one
that.
where the prop template just screams it, right? We've got 10 combined wins for these guys in the UFC level, right? So 9 of them are by Meerschaert and 1 of them is by Jotko. So just by that, you should almost be paying like minus 900 for finish only for Meerschaert, but you're paying plus 120. It makes no sense. I slammed it for 2 units.
Yeah, when we get lines like that, Weezy, we got to take advantage there. But let's keep moving on. We have the next fight on the card, and it is Darren Elkins going against Tristan Connelly. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 minus 210. Under 2.5 rounds is plus 170. The fight goes to decision minus 185, and the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 150. Weezy, this is a fight that I want absolutely nothing to do with, but I am curious to see what the model says here.
So, okay. Combined wins for these guys, 27 out of 40 inside the distance, 67.5%. 7 of 17 losses inside the distance, it's 41.2%. You combine those two numbers, you're getting about a 60% finish rate inside the distance for both guys combined. That's 16.6% better than 43.04%, which is the UFC finish rate for 145 pounders, and 18% better than the implied probability of the line. The problem with looking at the UFC finish rates here is that we've got 2 fights for Connelly and 25 fights for Elkins. So it's almost like we have to kind of consider only Elkins data if we're looking to the right side of the spreadsheet, which isn't healthy, when we're, because there's 2 people involved in this fight. But we see that 10 of their 27 combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance. That's only 37%. That's 6% worse than the divisional finish rate of 43%, and it's 4.6% worse than the implied probability of the line, which is 41.67%. So based on the UFC stats, it looks like the fight doesn't go is a little bit overpriced, and the fight goes is about perfectly priced. God. And I mean, like, we do see a lot more green over here on the left. For the fight goes to decision, we see a lot of red down here. And we see a lot more green up here. And, we do have 2 guys that are 36 and 37 years old. And I mean, like, Darren Elkins is the dictionary definition of shop worn at this point. I mean, this guy's got so much tread on the tires. When will he start bleeding? I think it's already started. I think he might have taken a lukewarm shower today and opened up a cut on his forehead. So I would lean that this fight's going to finish inside the distance, Brady, but the template, it's really not screaming. Let's see what it says over here by the betting lines. So yeah, it looks like everything is pretty fairly priced. The fight doesn't go to decision, maybe underpriced by about 1.37%. Fight goes overpriced by about 8%. I would lean fight doesn't go here, but there's nothing that the template is telling me that says, you got to get in on this one.
Yeah, and on top of that, I just can't bet this fight. Like you said, 36, 37-year-olds going out here. Darren Elkins, is he completely washed? Do you have a couple more fights in him? I don't know. Just a really, really sketchy fight that I don't want to put any money on, but I will be putting some money on this next fight. We have Grant Dawson going against Jared Gordon. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 minus 220. Under 2.5 rounds is plus 180. The fight goes to decision minus 200, and the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 155.
A lot of green on the left side of this spreadsheet, Brady. 23 of these guys, 35 wins inside the distance, about 65.5%. 5 of 5 combined losses inside the distance. Very, very predictive there. That's huge. So we got 28 of these guys, 41 combined pro fights have finished inside the distance. That's just below 70%. The implied probability of the line is less than 50%. So we're already seeing some value for the fight doesn't go here. Let's look at the UFC finish rates because we got good sample sizes for both guys. A total of 16 fights, right? 5 of 12 of these guys combined wins coming inside the distance. Dawson, a much better finisher than Gordon. And 3 of 3 combined UFC losses coming inside the distance for these guys. That comes out to 8 of 16 fights because we have a draw too that have finished inside the distance. So versus the divisional finish rate, that's right on. And versus the implied probability of the line, because we're getting plus 155 in this case. That's saying that we're getting 10% better than the implied probability of the line, and we're getting 11.15% better when we take that divisional finish rate of 50.37% over the long term, Brady, and we subtract the implied probability of the line of 39.22%, we're seeing an 11% edge there. And even for the under 2.5, we're also seeing a 10.53% edge. If we just flip back to Connelly here, this is what a fairly priced line looks like when we see those numbers on either side of zero. But with Gordon Dawson, we see a lot of green here in the under 1.5, the under 2.5, and the fight doesn't go to decision. And here's the reason, right? The fight goes is priced up to minus 200. So they're telling you 66.67% implied probability. But, when we go down to the decision numbers here for these guys in the UFC, we see that just under half of them have went to decision, 7 of 16. So, we are telling us, like, the eyes tell you, Dawson's a grappler, Gordon's a grappler. Neither one of them have been submitted. So, there's a really good chance that this goes to decision. But when you compare it against the benchmarks, when you compare it to where the line is priced, it's telling you that the value here is on the under.
Yep, for sure. And like you said, like, we think this fight is probably going to go to decision, but are we going to lay minus 200 on the fight goes to decision? That's where you can say, absolutely not. I'm way overpaying for this. And on top of that, at the end of the day, Dawson is a minus 190 favorite just about. And Dawson has like an 89% finish rate, and Gordon's been finishing all 4 of his losses. So even that's terrifying. So this is one that I'm probably going to stay away from. I kind of like when my analysis lines up with the numbers, and it does not here. I think it does go to decision, but yeah, I mean, it's sticking out, dude. It really is. Plus 155. It's definitely a value shot there.
Yeah, and like you just said, dude, Gordon's the favorite. Or I mean, sorry, Dawson's the favorite. And you look at him and his wins, dude, 15 of 17 wins coming inside the distance. So,
yeah.
That's kind of terrifying here. I think that, maybe if you're on the Gordon side, maybe you think that this goes to decision. But shit, man. Even Dawson was very close to being finished there at the end of the Glenn fight. So if this fight plays out the same way, Gordon's the guy that's got really good conditioning. He might be the dude to actually finish Grant Dawson. So yeah, man, the fight doesn't go to decision. Big time plus money here. And I think that that's where the value is. I'm going to be looking at that one.
Yep, and BetOnline does have plus 155. It looks like that is the best price out there. It looks like FanDuel plus 132. DraftKings plus 140, so the plus 155 looks to be the best price. Let us move on to the next fight. We have Andre Fili going against Joe Anderson. Brito, we have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5, minus 170. The under 2.5 rounds is plus 140. The fight goes to decision, minus 140. The fight doesn't go to decision, is plus 110.
We see a lot of green over here on the overall finish rates between these guys. 66% in their combined wins, 54% in their combined losses, about 61% when you combine all 46 fights. Go over here to the right side of the book, and we are seeing, we've got data here for Fili. 6 of his 17 UFC fights have finished inside the distance, and 0 of 2 of Brito's fights have finished inside the distance. So that's only 6 of 19. So really, it's telling us that we're severely overpaying here for the fight doesn't go to decision, and the fight doesn't go is at plus money here because 31% of these guys combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance, but the implied probability that we're paying is 47.62%. So that's 11.5% that we're overpaying there, or I'm sorry, 16% that we're overpaying compared to the implied probability of the line, and 11% compared to the finish rate of 43.04%. So when we look at the UFC stats down here, it does look that fight goes to decision. We're getting 10% better than the implied probability of the line and 11.5% better than the combined decision rates of the two guys at the UFC level. But when we look over here at the left side of the sheet, we're seeing that only 16 of these guys' 46 combined pro fights have went to decision. So I don't like this, right? We've got the red here on the bottom, and then we go kitty corner up here, and we've got red here at the top. So what that tells me, Brady, is that these guys are finishing fights pre-UFC, but they're not quite finishing fights at the UFC level. And that's something that we see a lot of, right? Of course, you're going to finish the regional scene competition if you're really good, if you're moving up that ladder. You should be crushing cans, but once you get to the UFC level, you often see that those finish rates, they do drop. You got guys coming into the UFC with 90% finish rates, and then after 6 wins, maybe they got 2 out of 6 wins that have come inside the distance. So it looks like if we look at the UFC numbers for these guys, we want to be betting the fight goes here. But on the aggregate, when you look at the fight goes data, you're seeing that 46 fights combined between these two guys, and only 16 of them have went to decision. So it kind of feels like a stay away bet for me.
Yep, same thing. Kind of lean. The fight doesn't go earlier in the week. I think it's going to be best to just stay away here. Looks like the fight doesn't go. Best line you can get is plus 125. I think I'm just going to stay away from this one as well, and the model agrees with that. So we'll move on to the co-main event. Andrei Arlovski going against Jake Collier. This one should be interesting to talk about. The over-under is set at 2.5, which you typically do not see at heavyweight, and what you also don't see is the over 2.5 at minus 220, and the under 2.5 is at plus 180. The fight goes to decision is minus 190, and the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 155. Weezy, I have a feeling we're going to be completely overpaying for some of these fight goes props.
Yeah, it's just how it goes, man. It's an Arlovski fight, and Arlovski's fights have not been finishing inside the distance at all. I mean, he's a heavyweight that fights like a flyweight with no power and no submission ability. So his fights just he's kind of like, reminds me a little bit of a Shamil Abdurakhimov, who can just kind of hypnotize his opponents with how handsome he is and just slow down the fight to his pace and kind of win minutes and seconds and bank rounds. And that's what Andrei's been doing. He's really done a nice job of lengthening his career, being able to make a lot of money towards the end of his career, fighting, average heavyweights and, winning more than he loses. So when we look, we got big sample sizes here, Brady. 74 combined fights for these guys. 62% have finished inside the distance. That's right on the divisional finish rate. And it's actually 23% better than the implied probability of the line. And when we go over here to the UFC stats, which is what we have to do for this, it's telling us that the value is on the fight doesn't go to decision, right? Because 53.2% of these guys combined 47 UFC fights have finished inside the distance. But we're only paying 39.22% for fight doesn't go to decision. So we're getting a 14% value over that line right now. But like when we see lines fairly priced, we've seen it already a couple of times today, Brady. We see that this line here is all yellow. Well, what do we see here? We're seeing massive numbers. And it's basically the book saying, look, we know that Arlovski fights slow, and we know that his fights don't finish anymore. So we don't really care so much about the divisional finish rates, what the aggregates are. We got to price up this line, because if we don't, we're going to get run over by a bunch of people coming to the window betting fight goes. And then and back on the stock exchange, there used to be like an old saying, when you were taking a position and that position was going against you, when you're buying it and you're buying it and you're buying it and it's going down, 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 they'd say, well, now you're fucking wearing it, and that's what these books, they don't want to be wearing that line. They don't want to be wearing the fight goes to decision line for an Arlovski fight, because when you look at the data and what this guy's been doing for the last 6 years of his career, all of his fights are going to decision except for the Aspinall fight. And Aspinall is on his way to the goddamn title, it looks like. So what it's telling us is our eyes are telling us this fight's going to decision. But what the books are telling us is, yeah, we know it's going to decision. So we're going to make you overpay by about 25% over what you would have to pay for the divisional benchmarks and over what you would have to pay for what these guys' combined finish rates or decision rates are at the UFC level. So fight probably goes to decision, but do you want to overpay for it? Do you want to pay minus 190, which is 65.52% implied probability, when heavyweight fights go to decision only 36% of the time, dude? It's such a tough row to hoe to be overpaying that much for a line. So yeah, the fight probably goes to decision, but I don't think we should be betting it.
Yep, for sure. I mean, they did open up the over 2.5 at -115. I would have liked that, but now it's like -220. So, yeah, another one that's probably going to go to decision, but one that I'm not running into the window for by any means there. But we'll go to the main event here. One last fight. We have Rob Font going against Marlon Vera. Cannot wait for this main event. It's going to be awesome. We have the over under. Looks like it is set at 4.5. The over 4.5 is -160. Under 4.5 is +130. The fight goes to decision is -150, and the fight doesn't go to decision is +120. What you seeing here, Weezy?
Fight goes is not now -150.
Yep, the fight goes is now -150 on Bet Online.
-150, and the fight doesn't go where?
Is +120.
120. Okay. Well, right now, from what I'm seeing, it looks like the value is going to be in the fight doesn't go, but we've got the interesting situation here. We've got big finishers combined with guys that are very, very durable. So you see a big green block here in the wins, and you see a big red block here in the losses, which means, yes, these guys finish inside the distance. Do they get finished? No. So it's a tricky line to bet. It's another situation where it's like, shit, man, maybe I have to bet well, you can say like that one guy is more durable than the other, but really only one of these guys' 12 combined losses have come inside the distance. So it's probably a very low probability that this fight, finishes inside the distance. These guys are very durable. 28 of these guys' 50 fights have finished inside the distance. That's actually 10% better than the implied probability of the line. And we have to keep in mind that this is a 5-round fight. And when we go over here to this, we see 17 of these guys, 31 UFC fights have finished inside the distance, 55%, 5.4% better than the divisional finish rate, and 9.4% better than the implied probability of the line, which is 45.45%. So it does look like the under is where the value is, but you just don't want to be betting unders when you've got 10 combined losses and only one of them has been inside the distance. So we might have to overpay for the fight goes here, but the fight goes at -150, 60%. Let's do something, Brady, here. I've got my 5-round fight database here because unfortunately, the analytics that I have right here are for the 3-round fights.
Mm-hmm.
So here's all the 5-round bantamweight fights that have happened since 2013. There have been 28 of them. In those 28 fights, we've seen 10 decisions. So 18 finishes divided by 28 fights. That's 64.2% of bantamweight 5-round fights that have finished inside the distance since 2013, right? So let's go back here. We're seeing a divisional finish rate of 49.43% in 3-round fights. But the reality is in 5-round fights, that number goes up by about 15%, Brady.
Wow.
So we could say that there's a lot more value when this fight doesn't go to decision at +120 than there appears. Mm-hmm. But once again, we've got that big fat problem of these guys having 10 combined UFC losses. Only one of them has been a finish.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, Marlon Vera's probably pound for pound one of the most durable fighters in the UFC, and then you have Rob Font, who's never been knocked out as well. So yeah, that's the problem. Both guys are just so tough. But like you said, 5 rounds, and that's a big difference between the 3-round fights and the 5-round fights. I think that's awesome information right there.
Yeah, and I've got to eventually do 5-round prop templates so that we have that unique information and we can treat that main event differently than the 3-round fights. When we're analyzing these numbers, we have to be very particular about how we compare them because it's in the analysis. This is where we actually define the value. Will the bet cash? Of course, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But like we say, if we have an eye on that value over the long term, it's going to really help us be profitable.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, yeah, good show, Weezy. We did it. Do you want to give a PP? Last week we gave an 8-legger. I think we went like 6 out of 8. So maybe like a 2 or 3-legger. Anything sticking out?
Yeah. Like so definitely love the fight goes to decision for Taira Candelario at plus 110, right?
Okay.
And I think you'd also like that minus 130 fight doesn't go to decision for Lacerda Figgy. We got a kill or be killed fighter with not much of a gas tank. So that feels like a good one at minus 130.
Okay.
And then the other two that I had mentioned are ones where we're looking at value, the Mazany Young plus 120 fight doesn't go to decision. The Dawson Gordon plus 155 fight doesn't go to decision. Maybe we can add one of those two in there, but at plus 110 and minus 130, what could we get for a parlay for just those two legs?
So plus 110 and minus 130. It looks like we are sitting at plus 266 for those two.
Plus 266. Is that, I would be interested to know if the chat thinks that is enough, or should we add a third leg in there? Because plus 266 ain't bad, dude. 1 unit to win 2.66, and we like both of these spots and think that we're getting some value there.
I think it's solid, dude. Like, I know people like their 20-leg parlays and stuff, but
yeah,
I think that's solid.
Yeah, man. Why don't we stick with that? We'll do the Taira
right.
Candelario fight goes, and we'll do the Lacerda Figgy fight doesn't go. And that one is coming out to what? Plus 265, did you say?
Yeah, plus 266.
I like it, man. That is going to be the probability 2-leg parlay for the week.
The PP, and we got yeah, I can't pronounce this now. I'm sorry.
Rougewan?
Rougewan. Yeah, he's saying no, don't add an I. I agree with Rougewan there. So
yeah, good call, man. Yeah,
there we go. I like it.
Let's do it.
Let's hit that PP. Okay, so Weezy, let the people know where they can find you, what you have going on throughout the week. I believe you are done with content for the week, right?
I'm done with content for the week. I always finish it up with probability every week, but I will be on your channel, Brady, 1 hour before the prelims on Saturday doing best bet with you and Eric Betts fights and Narco Cop. And you can find me on my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy, every Tuesday night, 10 o'clock Central Time. I do a full card breakdown called Just the Tip. We finish with Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week. I also do Ask Weezy and Balls Deep breakdowns on my channel. And then you can always find me here on the MMA Engine YouTube channel doing probability, doing Balls Deep breakdowns here. Check us out on the MMA Engine website coming soon. And hey, we got to stack cash tickets like flapjacks for UFC Vegas 53. And it starts with this week's plus 266 probability PP, baby.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out. You guys can leave a like. As always, it does go a long way. Subscribe here to the MMA Engine. Let's keep growing the channel. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the numbers. I will be out next week. Like I said, Lou Betcha stepping in on short notice to be the host. So that should be fun. And of course, next week we have UFC 274, which is going to be a complete banger. So that to look forward to. But yeah, let's make some money this week. Best of luck, guys. We'll talk to you very soon. Thank you guys for hanging out.